we're taking a closer look at the mistrial for Massachusetts woman Karen Reed. Her defense team claims that their client, who is accused of killing her boyfriend with her SUV, was framed and who was being accused of being the forefront of the cover-up. Well, a name we've heard many times throughout this trial, Trooper Michael Proctor. We were talking about that in the last segment. One of the lead investigators themselves was on trial, if you will. Kind of reminded me a lot of OJ and Mark Furman. Well, yesterday, after the mistrial was announced, state police announced that Proctor has been, quote, relieved, end quote, from his duty. Not surprising, but will provide an interesting development. They said in a statement, the department took immediate action to relieve Trooper Michael Proctor of duty and formally transfer him out of the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office State Police Detectives Unit. This follows our previous decision to open an internal investigation after information about serious misconduct emerged in testimony at the trial. This investigation is ongoing. That is quote, end quote. Let's go back to some of Proctor's unbelievable testimony to see what serious misconduct they're referring to. And I can tell you, in my world, still as a practicing lawyer, my phone lit up with practicing attorneys, not just TV lawyers, but practicing lawyers who were in disbelief. Let's take a listen.
What did you tell your colleagues that you were looking for as you sat at almost 10 p.m. at night on a Wednesday night, August 17th, 2022, looking through Karen Reed's phone?
I didn't tell them I was looking through anything. They knew I was going through Miss Reed's phone. I provided a inappropriate joke as an update. They knew I was going through location data, text messages, Google searches. But like I had mentioned earlier, I had to stop.
Except Trooper Proctor, none of that really professional sounding stuff ended up in your comments to your bosses, did it?
Again, it was a poor joke.
Is that yes or no?
It did not, no.
It did not?
No,
As
sir.
a matter of fact, what did you write after you talked about going through the, quote, retarded client's phone?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No nudes so far.
No nudes so far, correct?
Correct.
And you said that to your bosses.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever looked for naked photos of a male suspect that you were investigating?
I don't look for naked photos in anyone's phones.
But you said you were looking for nudes of Miss Reed.
Like I had said, Mr. Jackson, it was an inappropriate joke.
Sir, this is a citizen. She's a woman. You were supposed to be objectively investigating. Does your text message to your colleagues at Massachusetts State Police reflect an objective investigation of a citizen?
Objection.
You can get part of that question and ask it again.
Do you believe that your text messages were reflective of an objective investigator?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Do you believe that, Trooper Proctor?
I believe poor jokes have, in unprofessional language, have no bearing on the integrity and the facts and physical evidence of this case.
It's not that they don't have any bearing on the facts and integrity. It's that they have no place in a professional investigation because it shows bias, right?
Objection.
So I have to sustain that as asked. Go ahead and ask it differently, Mr. Jackson.
You weren't so much as objectively investigating Karen Reed as objectifying her, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Isn't that right?
Rephrase the question, please.
You weren't so much as objectively investigating her as objectifying her in those moments, correct?
Again, Mr. Jackson, it was a poor choice of words and a joke that I should not have texted out, but from the start of the investigation, we didn't know what we had.
And your, Trooper Proctor, your point in saying no nudes so far to your colleagues in Massachusetts State Police was to suggest that you were looking for nudes and you'd update them when you found them, correct?
Incorrect.
Now, that was former Trooper Michael Proctor being asked about what he did with defendant Karen Reed's phone after confiscating it in police custody. So now understand that this is just a minor scratching of the surface of the bad stuff that came out with regard to the phone and his responses to it. Joseph Scott Morgan We are in 2024, I believe, at last count. And we've had the use of cell phones and text messages for a considerable period of time. Understanding as professional law enforcement officers, of which I was one for many years of my life, that they are subject to probably discovery. The fact that he's texting these things during an investigation to superiors is a little offsetting, certainly nicks his credibility and professionalism, especially in an investigation that was so sloppily investigated in the first place. What were your thoughts when you were listening to this?
I was thinking about when I first started out as an investigator all those years ago. And do you remember, Bob, we used to have the black and white notebooks with the spine running down the side. And you had to hold on to all of your notes. I know that you know that as an attorney, you know, we can't destroy those. So we'd have this long catalog. And I was thinking, would you have written this down in a notebook? Is that something that you would want the defense to see? But now we're in a world where you're using this kind of digital format with a phone. And look, at Jacksonville State, I teach all of my students, my undergrad students, you have to pretend when you're working a crime scene, okay, that not only is a body there, but you have to imagine that there are members of a 12-member jury watching everything you do, along with attorneys. That's the way you need to keep your mind on the rails, between the guardrails, as you move forward with an investigation. Counsel makes a good point of objectivity. Everything just kind of goes out the door. And listen, this is not the first time I've heard this. I've been involved in cases where I had police officers that got engaged in this sort of ridiculous behavior, and it did wind up compromising the case. One case in particular that I recall is a homicide.
Yeah, well, you know, Lateef, that's a really, really good point. That's kind of how I preface this. This is 2024. This isn't like the first time text messages got out there and they were embarrassing. There's a lot of gallows humor that goes on in the investigation of homicide cases, I can tell you firsthand. But you not only does it show a disregard because they know that these things can be discovered, but I'm interested in your thoughts about the fact that the superiors he's writing this to didn't feel the need to reprimand him at the time. Only after they lost the case, if you will, there was a mistrial, has he now been relieved of his duties. I think it speaks volumes about the culture of the police department.
And that's a good word to use. It shows me that the culture in this police department is accepting of this type of behavior. And it also shows me that this isn't the first time that this officer has done something like this. You know, this is a high-profile murder case, and he's sending these kind of text messages, which are discoverable. So it seems to me like this isn't the first time he's done it. He's much too comfortable doing it. And so it just reflects on a nasty culture. And the fact that they waited until after they had a hung jury to discipline him is a bit troubling. He should have been disciplined a long time ago.
Yeah, and I think that really, in the jury's mind, and I used to just say as a prosecutor, for those who are out there that watch what it is we do here at the Law&Crime Network, especially as a prosecutor, your credibility and the credibility of your officers is as important as the substance of it. So it's really something
Bob, listen, what Lateef just said is fantastic, and this is why. In that interim, since this case started and he was working the case, this isn't the only case he's been involved in. Think about the trickle-down impact of this in regards to anything else that he's been involved with since that point in time. He can be impugned as a result of that. I think that that's even a broader issue, and maybe the squad that he's a part of as well, because you know you mentioned the administration. You know, what other decisions are they making with the personnel there? What else has this guy been involved in with ongoing investigation? Is it the same thing? Because I got to tell you, buddy, he felt very, very comfortable with this. And generally, comfort arises from practice many times.
All right. Thanks, Joseph. Appreciate that. And we're going to move on now into, even during his direct examination, the prosecution had to bring up certain inappropriate text messages he sent. You know, it's funny because I just asked my producer beforehand whether the prosecutors did that, because that's good to get ahead of it. But obviously it's something I'm sure prosecutors, obviously if they had to get ahead of it, didn't like. Let's take a listen.
And turning your attention to the next page, 2538, at the top, if you could just read a series of responses from yourself, correct?
Yes, sir.
Read from those, sir.
Yep, so these came from me. From all accounts, he didn't do anything wrong. She's a whack job.
Objection.
So don't spell it. You have to. So these are your words, Trooper Proctor?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead and say them.
Yes, she's a babe. Weird Fall River accent, though.
And sir, what is it that you were referring to there, or why would you text that?
These were, from all accounts, he didn't do anything wrong. Is talking about the homeowner, Mr. Albert. I had mentioned the compelling evidence against Ms. Reed at this point indicated that Mr. Albert had nothing to do with Mr. O'Keefe's death. The rest of the unprofessional and regrettable comments are something I'm not proud of, and I shouldn't have wrote in a private or any type of setting.
Now, sir, if I could direct you to page 2543. And sir, if I could direct you to the top of the page and ask you to read through that page, indicating who's speaking and what the content of those communications were.
Okay. Number ending in 4146. Question, is that chick a smoke? Again, 4146 question mark. I respond EH. I respond again, nutbag, as Chief would say. I also respond with, she's got a leaky balloon knot, leaks poo.
And what, if anything, is that in reference to?
Again, to Ms. Reed's some medical conditions there. Again, unprofessional comments I should not have made, and that I'm not proud of.
As far as attitudes expressed within these text messages and other text messages, what, if any, impact did that have as far as your investigation was concerned regarding this?
These juvenile, unprofessional comments have zero impact on the facts and the evidence and the integrity of this investigation. They said these are unprofessional comments, but they absolutely do not detract from the integrity of the investigation or the facts and evidence of it.
Yeah, Lateef, I mean, this is what this witness has to say. And it could not, maybe it doesn't affect the integrity of it, but the fact he's got to answer to these really, unbelievably disgusting text messages during an investigation impairs his credibility as an individual. And I wonder, you mentioned this before, that they jumped right to a press conference saying they were going to retry the case. And now, after they've made that commitment, the state police have essentially fired him from his job, which I imagine is something that may come out in the next trial. His credibility is going to be impaired even further with regard to this, and yet they've made a commitment to go forward with it. Do you think this is something where they could sit there and say this witness now is completely spent, given the fact that the police have now fired him?
Well, if they try to bring him as a witness in the next trial, if there is a next trial, he's going to be heavily impeached. His credibility is going to be challenged in every way. So it's not a good look for the prosecution, and it's not a good look for this officer. But one thing he did say in one of those text messages was he called the lady a nutbag, and he said, as the chief would say. So it appears to me that this is a cultural problem and that his firing was some sort of way to save face, because it appears that this conduct goes all the way to the chief, according to his text messages.
Yeah, but Lateef, me and you have been around the block, okay? So let me ask you if this is a scenario that may surprise you, that somebody starts investigating him. Now, at least in the state of New Jersey, and most states have similar laws, if you violate a rule, a procedure, or a practice of a police department, you could be charged with a criminal offense of official misconduct. It doesn't have to mean that you committed a crime. It just has to mean that you violated a rule. Is there any possibility that we hear him say if he goes to a defense lawyer like me and yourself or others, hey, I don't want you on the stand testifying about anything at this point in time, because anything you say could be used against you in an investigation. Could this man assert his right to remain silent, further frustrating the prosecution?
He could. I mean, he could, but whether he does that at this point, given that he's already testified and made numerous statements, I find that hard to believe, but he could. I mean, whether he's being investigated at this point, we'll probably know sometime in the future. But if he's not, he should have been investigated a long time ago, because this conduct is certainly very unbecoming of a law enforcement official.
All right. Well, you heard it here first here at the Law&Crime Network that this is a possibility that I think could be very distinct. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break here. We are going to be talking YSL updates and a break and the possibility of a recusal of a judge. Great cases today here on the plate. We'll be right back.